Welcome, everyone. I have a cat who is insisting on me holding her right this very second. So this is Marta, everyone. You can see her.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, he's floofy and cute. Okay, you head over there, baby. All right, so Colin is out tonight. He's actually on PTO, so a little vacation for him. So I once again am going to pretty much just jump into my portion of the class. So let's see, everyone's already got my screen. Yeah, so let's get into this. We are talking about spring into MVC, the MVC pattern. And we'll kind of start the very beginning of your knowledge of how to build a Spring Java application by talking about controllers and routing. It's kind of the most important little foundational piece. So a couple quick announcements, then we will get into lecture on chapters 9 and 10. And then you will split out for studio chapter 10, which I'm happy to announce is a fairly fast and simple studio, not a monster like the last two classes. So again, graded assignment number 2 deadline is coming up on Monday the 2nd. And that's everything from chapters 4 to 7. That's the object-oriented edition of Tech Jobs. The catch-up class is going to be on the 28th, so a week from tonight, and we'll do class 9 on Monday before that. Okay, so let's talk about Spring and MVC. So this is something new that will allow you to build a Java web application. I'm going to explain a little bit about what the MVC pattern is, and then we're going to talk about the specifics of getting a project spun up with Spring Boot with using Gradle for the build. Okay, so when you want to interact with the user in a browser using a Java application, you already know the basics of Java syntax, and you know how to run a Java program in a console. So now we're going to learn how to actually run a web application where you have HTTP requests, and you could put content on a page. You can have somebody fill out a form and send that content back and do something with it. So look at that. I've got bullet points. Okay. Send content to be displayed on the page. I need to get my actual slide thing up here. Give me just a second here. Then I will know what's coming. Okay. Yeah. So it would be ridiculously complex if you had to build this from scratch. So that's why frameworks like Spring and the Spring Boot exist. And it uses Gradle to build the application. That's what we're going to choose instead of Maven. And it uses this tech called Tomcat to actually serve it to a specific port in the browser so that you can open it up for local development. So let's talk about the MVC pattern, and then we'll kind of come back to Spring and Gradle. So there's this idea of how you might manage the flow of data between all the different parts of your application and the user. So this MVC stands for Model, View, and Controller. It's a very common pattern that's used with Java web applications. And the model part is where it handles like the logic and the manipulation of the data. That's where a lot of your classes are stored and things like that. The view is what we refer to as the part that handles the interaction with the user in the browser, that displays things on the page. So you have HTML templates, things like that. We're actually going to learn how, in a couple of classes, how to use Timeleaf, which is a way to have some dynamic templates with HTML files. And then the controller is kind of the go-between. It's the traffic cop. So ultimately, we will arrive later in the unit with the database piece as well. I kind of have it grayed out here for now because we're not going to get there right away. We're going to deal mostly just with the M, the V, and the C. But the database is kind of the, but behind all the model parts that holds the data and allows you to request data and update data and things like that. We'll get there. It's all going to come together. So let's talk about, let's see. while I have this diagram on the page, does anyone have questions about this pattern? It's going to become easier once we really start digging into it the next few weeks, but does anybody have any questions right this very moment? It's okay if you don't. Nope. Okay. All right, let's talk about Spring. If you want to create a project using Spring Boot with Gradle, the first place you start is with the Spring initializer. So this is at start.spring.io. I actually have it up right over here. And you're going to select Gradle, Groovy specifically, version of Gradle, Java, and you want to keep whatever current like default version of Spring Boot is there. Right now, it is 3.1.3. And all these ones that say like snapshot and things like that, you want to ignore those. Just do the default. Okay. You can enter org.launchcode as the group. That's perfectly fine because these are all just student projects that you're doing. And then generally the project name convention is to use lowercase hyphenated, whatever project name you create. You'll want jar packaging and you want to choose Java version 17. And then you'll add any dependencies. And the 2 dependencies you need for now, we'll get into more later, but for now you just need 2, Spring Web and Spring Boot Dev Tools. And then you can just download that zip file and get it, unzip it and put it where you want it on your computer. And in theory, you'll already have a Git repo that you've created to hold the project. You can put it there and then you can open it up in IntelliJ and get started. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to do this and demonstrate it for you. So I've come here. Let me make this a little bigger, easier for you guys to read. I've selected Gradle, Groovy. I've selected Java as the language. I've got, the default version 3.1.3 of Spring Boot selected. I've put in org.launchcode. I've given it the name art/gallery. So what we're going to do, we're going to work on a project that's going to take us all the way through to class 20. From now on, all my lecture examples will be us building the same project a little bit at a time, making it more and more complex and more cool, really. So I put that in, it automatically updates that as the name by default. I didn't change the description, but you could. And then it builds this package name automatically using the group and the artifact. So that's there. And then jar is the packaging and 17 is the version of Java. Okay, so that's that side. Over here, I went to this add dependencies and I selected these 2 that you see here, Spring Web and Spring Boot Dev Tools. And you can search for them if you don't see them right away. And then once you have all of that, you can hit this generate button down here and it actually will download that zip file that you need. John, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just pulling up the website to like follow along, and where you have 3.1.3, for me, it's coming up as 3.1.4.
What, let me refresh.
And I just went to start.spring
Hey,
or .io.
that's because in the last 24 hours, they updated it.
Okay.
I just
I just wanted to make
it.
sure that wasn't going to mess us up.
Nope. They're constantly updating it so that, yeah, that's why I'm saying I can't give you a specific number because you just want to use the default, whatever they suggest. That's what you want because it will continue to update over time. Yeah, that's funny because I mean, literally, I just pulled this up like last night or something. Okay. Cool. So I did that. I downloaded it. I've got it. I'm going to unzip it, which you can't see me because I'm on a different screen, but I have unzipped it. And what I'm going to do, I have a version of this already in my in a repository that will be the link to. It's a new repository. It's different from my previous lecture examples. And the link will be in the slides if you guys get the slides later. So for now, I'm going to stick it on my desktop, actually. You can see it right here. And I'm just going to open it from here in IntelliJ. So let me go. Here's, before I do that, actually, let me spin up. This is the class 18 solution. So this is where we've got a database, which I also have running in the background, and a whole bunch of files. We've got controllers and data repositories for the to facilitate the data coming to and from the database. And we've got all these models, these different classes. We've got CSS, we've got an image, we've got a bunch of different time leaf templates in the form of HTML files. So this is where we're headed, guys, all these files that you see. And there will be even more when we get to doing like authentication and stuff in class 19. So I've got this up and running, and I'm going to just show you where we're headed, because I think it's going to be kind of fun for you guys to see what we're working toward. And so I'm going to go localhost 8080. And you see we have a landing page. This is just the home page, and I've got this little menu up here. We can go to artists. So the idea here is that this is like the back end admin portal for the application. And I can go and view a list of artists. These are former students of mine, including one Alex Hove, who's one of your TAs. You can go in and you can view, the artworks of these people. And so like we can go to one of his that's awesome. It's a painting that he did, and we have some details about it. And this is specifically uses the ID number as a path parameter here. We're going to talk about that tonight, so that you can view one at a time. We've got, a way to add artwork with a form here. We've got a way to delete artwork with a different type of form here. We can come over and view styles. We can add a style through, something if we need to make another one available, etc. So lots of different ways to do, the management of all of this data behind the scenes. And this is what we're working on building, is the interface for that. And then toward the very, very, very end of class, by class 20, I'm going to do a quick demo for you of what it would look like to actually put a React front end on this. My existing one is actually an Angular, and if I don't have time to do the React one, I might just use that. But I'd like to do React because that's what you guys have learned in this cohort. And it actually would say, okay, let's actually have a React app that will be the front facing that the public would see, and we'll keep this as our kind of back end, management for administration, right? And this is a very, a realistic way that you might have, a project set up to have, be able to work with this data and display it at different locations and stuff. So that's where we're headed. We're gonna, be able to make all of this work together. Tonight, it will be much, much simpler. And this thing moved on me again. Let me move this back down. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna take that away, and we're gonna get back to opening up a different project here. So I'm gonna go to IntelliJ's menu here, to the file menu, and say open. Just going to go directly to my desktop and see this folder and double click on that. And sure, trust the project. Yep. Okay. And I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to stop the application, in fact, because we want to run this one instead. Okay. So here is what I first get when I open this up. Now, immediately we see some red messages here, and it's having issues with compatibility with Java 13. So let me talk about that for a second. If we get this running and it integrates with Gradle, it'll build the project, and you should be able to actually view all the files and use boot run to start it up. I will do this for you in a second once we fix the issue. Tomcat, you may have noticed, if you saw the logs running before, and I'll point this out again, it showed that Tomcat was serving it up at localhost 8080. And that last line will say, I started the art gallery application or whatever. And then if you actually go and look at it before you've added anything into your application, you should see this white label error page. And that's actually success. That means it's up and running. It just means you haven't sent it any content, right? So that's okay. So the error is exactly what you want to see. Okay, but if you have issues, as I am, with some mismatched Java versions here are the different places you're going to want to go. One is the build.gradle file, and this one should be correct because it comes directly from what we set up as, saying, this one. we said we want version 17, right? So it put that in there for us, and that's what we want. If we go over into the project structure folder here, oops, I'm sorry, I clicked on this and I didn't mean to. If we go over into this project structure folder, so that's up here under file, and you go to project structure, immediately I see that the SDK version says 13. So I'm going to change that to 17, say okay. And then the third place I want to look is in the preferences, which they now call settings up here. And if I go down to build, execution, and deployment, go to build tools and click on Gradle, I'll see here that the Gradle JVM is set to 17, but sometimes it might be set to something different. So you always want to check this one too. So as long as they all now are in agreement, I should be able to go over and rebuild this. And I don't see anything here to click on yet, so I'm going to click the build project button up here. And let me try it here. Oh yeah, down here where it says reload Gradle project, that's what I want. Yeah, my bad. All right, so it's going to take a second, and then once that's successful, you can go up in here, because the very first time you do this, you're not going to have a configuration up here yet to hit the play button, hit the run button. But you can go into tasks, application, and then you want boot run. So just double click on that. And this will get it up and running. And once you see the Tomcat started on port 8080 and started Art Gallery application, that's when you know you can go and actually pull up localhost 8080. And there's that page I told you we were going to see, white label error page. That's good news. That means it's up and running. So to get rid of this, we are actually going to just have to write a controller method that's going to send content to this page, so that when we open up localhost 8080, we actually have some HTML there that's going to display some things for us. So we're well on our way. This is exactly what we need to do. Okay, so close that. This is where we're headed, is into the source main Java org launch code Art Gallery package right there. So let's let me see if anybody's got any questions about what I just did, and then we'll start getting into talking about the controllers and routing. Anybody got any questions at this point?
Can you just show the last slide really quick?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and these slides, of course, are going to be available, and you guys can go back and look at the PDF anytime. Okay, so let's talk about controllers and routing, and this is where we can really start to build our application to send content to the browser to display. So this is controllers are all about managing the flow of data. That's the the C and the MVC pattern, right? So I'm going to do a little bit of review of HTTP, just so everyone remembers the terminology around that, because that's going to be important for understanding what we're doing. I'm going to talk about the different controller annotations. You're going to be using annotations out the wazoo now that you are doing a Spring project. Just be aware. We'll talk about the controller class itself, about the routing aspect of things. We're going to talk about static GET requests and dynamic GET requests, and we'll talk about form input, and then what you can do to streamline your controllers when you start to develop different routes that then have routes that are coming off of them as well. So you can kind of break things out from one file into multiple controllers. All right, so let's talk about HTTP. You remember that there are different types of requests. There is the GET request, where you say, reach out to the backend and give me some data that I can display. So this is, from the browser's perspective. Post is, sending data to the backend. Put is updating data on the backend. We're not going to do any of that tonight. And delete is removing data from the backend. We're also not doing any of that. We're just focusing on get and post tonight. So an endpoint is another term that you may hear used for the URL that is providing the location of the resource on the server. The root path is always represented as a /. That's important. Remember that. So when we say localhost 8080, that can be represented as slash. That's the root. And then anything past that, those are called path parameters. You also might hear them called URI parameters. And those will follow separated by additional slashes. If you want query parameters, that's where it follows a question mark and you have those key value pairs with equal signs. So here's a couple examples. HTTPS and HTTP are schemes. Remember that the S just means it's secure. The host is, either localhost or like, www.abcwebsite.org. That's your host. If you have a port, when you're developing locally, you already have seen this before, like with React and other things, live server, things like that. And Tomcat uses 8080. So that's where you're going to have all these, the Spring applications served to. That's your port. And then your path is anything after that initial slash. And in the first example, we just have the path products. And then the second example, we have multiple, paths with their own paths. So shop products, and then we have like an ID number, right? In this first example, though, we also have a query parameter. And that query string is represented by the, starting with that exclamation point, having that key value pair put together with the equal sign. And if you had additional ones, there would be an ampersand, separating each one of them. And all you have to do is go to Amazon's website and go to some page for some product, and you're going to see a billion of these query parameters with all of the different options, right, when you do a search. Okay, so that's it for just reviewing this terminology, because we're going to be using it a lot. So let's talk about controllers themselves. When you want to create a controller for Java, you create a class and you write methods. And you're going to be using all of these annotations that are going to identify for Spring what the purpose of that class is, what the purpose of each method is, and how it should be processing it. And so I want to just kind of give you a list of all these annotations on one slide so that you can kind of see them all side by side. And then as I explain different ones, how they're used, we'll do that a little bit at a time, okay? So first, let's just talk about the controller annotation. It does require an import, but most of these, the minute you start typing them, it'll suggest, IntelliJ will suggest you can hit that tab key and it'll finish it for you and put the import statement at the top. So you have to put controller on the class if it's meant to be a class, a controller class. And then request mapping with some sort of value like slash or, slash artworks or something like that. And then response body, those can be used at the class level instead of applying them at the individual method level. And whether you do that or not just kind of depends on whether they apply to every single method in that controller class. So I'm going to show you examples of doing it both ways. But then at the method level, you might write a specific method to handle a request for just one route, like slash artworks. You can have get mapping and give it, slash artworks as the path that it's supposed to handle. You could have post mapping. Let's say we have an ad form and we want to do slash ad or slash artworks slash ad. We would give it that path and it'd say, okay, we're going to have a form and it's going to submit these things. We're going to use the post method. So we're going to write a method, a Java method that is going to handle that specific request for that specific path. Then you can use request mapping if you need to be able to handle multiple methods with the same Java method. So I'm going to be using the word method a lot, and sometimes I'm referring to HTTP methods, and sometimes I'm referring to Java methods. I'm going to try to always clarify, but hopefully with context, you guys will start, automatically picking up on it. Response body is something that we only are going to be using for a short bit, because you only need to do that when you're returning text, like a string that is going to be transmitted to the browser that might contain HTML, but we're doing it in text format directly as part of our return statement and our methods. And then once we get to the point where we start using HTML files with time leaf templates, we will take that response body annotation off because we don't need it anymore. We're saying we're actually going to return a file instead of returning some plain text. So we'll use it tonight, and I'll mention it again when I start doing it. Now, some of your methods are going to have parameters. When you're handling path parameters or query parameters, you have to have these to identify that's what those are. So request param is the annotation used for query parameters, and path variable is the annotation that's used for path parameters. And again, I will show you examples of both of these tonight. For your studio assignment, you're only going to need to do the query params, but you definitely need to know how to do both for going forward. Okay, so let's talk about just setting up a controller class to begin with. You always want to create a new package for controllers that's going to hold all your controller classes together. So we'll do that. And then we will create each class, and you name it with capital Pascal case, just like you do any other class. But you always put the word controller on the end to make it very obvious this is a controller class, even just looking in the tree, looking at the files. And then inside at the top of the class, just before the class definition, make sure that you've got that controller annotation on there so that Spring knows this is a controller class. Okay, and then that's where you start specifying routes with different Java methods inside the controller class. Let's do the first part and then we'll talk about this. So I'm just going to demonstrate. I'm going to go to Art Gallery here. So I've got source main Java org launch code Art Gallery. This is where I want to add a new package and say controllers. And then I'm going to, inside for controllers, I'm going to say I want a new class and I'm going to call it gallery. Oh boy, what just happened? I think I accidentally closed it. There we go. Gallery controller. Okay. And that's going to give me a file. Let me make this a little bigger for you guys. I'm going to close this. All right. So the first thing to do is to put that controller annotation. When I used the tab key there, it went ahead and added that import statement for me. If you are not in the habit of doing that, you're going to want to be, because it's going to make your life a lot simpler with all these annotations and stuff. Okay, so now we're inside here and we could say, all right, we need to start adding some methods so that we can handle the routing so that the browser knows what the content is meant to be when we go to that URL in the browser. Okay, so you can specify a route. The most basic one is that slash to represent the root path. What happens when you just go to localhost 8080 without adding any additional paths? Got to have something for the home page. So we can write this handler method and say that it's going to be for a GET request because the browser is saying, hey, just go get the content. I just need to know what to display on the page. And then it can send that content to the browser and render it at localhost 8080. And then of course you can create additional routes. We may, have localhost 8080/artworks. And so then we'll have another, handler method for /artworks. So this is what we're going to do. And so let's talk about the specific annotations that we're going to use with this. You want to use get mapping for a GET request. You want to give it that path for whichever one it represents. And then if you're not using any templates yet, you definitely need to add response body. And I mentioned that earlier because we're just returning plain text. You can define a public string method that returns that content just as a string. And then you'll have to restart your application every time you make changes before you go refresh it in the browser. It doesn't automatically recompile, okay? So this is a very simple example. I'm actually ultimately, we're gonna have something a little fancier than this. So let's say right now, I just wanted to add something to this gallery controller that would be, a real simple handler just for that home page. I could say, let's do get mapping and give it the slash to represent the home page. And I'll do response body because we're returning text and we're not returning a template. And then I'll say public string, and I'm going to say render homepage. I like to use verbs, first of all, to start off these methods. And I like to differentiate between rendering, just sending content with a GET request to render a page versus like processing a form. You'll also see people maybe say something like display homepage. These are good names to use. You want to get in the habit of doing something like that, where it makes it really clear for you what the purpose of that particular one is. Because after you have several of these, it might be hard for you to keep them straight in your head. Having good names really helps. Okay, so render homepage. And then inside, I could just say return, you know, welcome to the Midtown Art Gallery. Let's just see, you know, what happens if I do this, if I just send text. All right, so I'm going to start this up. And we're going to come back over here and I'm going to hit refresh. And it says, welcome to the Midtown Art Gallery. Okay, so we have successfully defined a handler method for the root path slash. We've said we're sending text, so response body, and then have just returned this string, and that's exactly what we see here. Zach, you got a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand what the response body is.
Say that again.
The response body?
What about it?
I'm not sure I understand what's the purpose of it.
Okay, so like when we get to the point that we are actually using templates, using HTML files to represent the content on the page, we're going to actually be submitting like the name, like I'll just say return index, and it's going to refer to the template.
Okay.
So then I would not want this here because I don't want index to show up on the page. So that's how you tell Spring which way you're doing it. I'm just take the string and send it to the browser and put it on the page. Use it, right? Use exactly what I send you. Versus if I take this off, then it says I have a template over there in my resources folder, and this is what it's called.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when we get to the next class, well, no, two classes from now, when we're doing time leaf templates, that's when we're going to change this and take this off.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Sneha, you have a question too?
Yeah, so like so far my understanding is then when in application, so whenever there is like a new page, we're gonna make a separate class for controller class for that, and whatever we do on that page, like add content or forms or get post content, for that we're gonna use the methods for that page, or like we're gonna use the sub routes for that, like inside that controller, right?
Right. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to define all of my methods for multiple routes in this controller, and then I'm going to show you how to streamline it and separate some of them out into another controller so that you can kind of see the difference between the two.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So now we have our very first thing. This is all we, really need to say, but let's say we wanted to format it a little more specifically. We could return some actual HTML. And it doesn't even have to have the HTML and body tags. It'll accept it just like this. So let's say I want an H2, it says Midtown Art Gallery, and then I want, welcome, view our artworks collection. Now I have an anchor there that goes to another route that I have not defined yet. So let's see what happens when I do this. I'm going to restart the application and come back over here. And once I see that it's, Tomcat has started on port 8080 again, I know I can refresh this. Yeah, and now we have this. But as soon as I click on this, I get an error because we don't have a handler yet for /artworks, right? So we're going to need another get handler to do this. And then once we click on that link, it'll work. All right, so let's do one more of these just to demonstrate how this is going to work. And so for this one, I'm going to say, let's see, I want to make sure my final solution is going to be a little different. So I'll make sure I get this right. All right. I'm going to do get mapping again. This time I'm going to say, I want this to be, this is what you're going to, the content that you're going to send if someone goes to /artworks. And again, I'm going to do response body because I'm going to send HTML as a string. And I'm going to say render artworks homepage. So it's the homepage for /artworks. So I could return, you know, something like, let's see, I'm gonna do this, just for a second. I'm gonna copy this instead of typing it out. And let's take this off for just a second. And let's just say we're going to return, you know, a header. And I have actually gone to the trouble of having the HTML in the body and all that stuff here. And I've got a little thing, and I've got a link to a form /add, which again, we haven't defined that yet. But we're going to have a way to say, you know, let's go over here so we can have a form and add another artwork. So let me restart this. All right, it's up and running. So I'm going to refresh this. And now when we click on this link, it takes us to the next page, /artworks. And now we see that content, artworks, click here to add another artwork. But of course, I click on this and then we have an error because we haven't defined that yet. So you can kind of see how this goes, right? You add route by route the content that you want. And it's nice to add links to get you from here to there without having to just come up here and type it in, because who wants to do that? That is, that's how we get that far. Now, what if you wanted to actually display some content on the page, like not just this, but work in some, you know, real content? Like, let's say we had a database and it was returning some information to us and we have access to that. We could actually do that. So I'm going to do, this thing here where I say, let's have, I have to import all these things. Let's see, map and hash map. Okay, I'm going to create a quick hash map that's going to basically represent data as if it was coming from a database. Okay, and it just basically associates an integer with a string. The ID number is 1. The name is girl with a pearl earring. So we've got some famous pieces of art here. And let's say that I wanted to actually display that in here. I could use, you guys have seen me do this before. I could use the string builder class to actually create some, sorry, give me just a second. Here we go. All right. I want to make sure I grab the right stuff here. I could actually say, let's go through and create a whole bunch of list items here that will represent each of these artworks. And so I can go through all the keys and I can, you know, use the keys as the numbers and, you know, actually go get from the hash map, get the actual artwork string using that key. And I can put all this together, and you guys can study this later, it's fine. But that's going to at least allow us to have a way to display each of these. And so then I can add back in this unordered list with all of those list items that are stored in this artworks list string builder. And I'll do that right here and put it in. So let's do this again. I'm going to refresh it or restart the application rather. And then refresh it in the browser. And now we have our list, and it displays, you know, each string as a list item in an unordered list. So it's bullet points. So, you know, this is how you might do that, how you might, you know, display some information. So now we have some actual data to work with, and, you know, each of them has its own ID number. We're going to be able to make use of that with some of the stuff we're going to learn on the next slides. All right, so let's talk about making a GET request dynamic. So this is where we're going to talk about query parameters and also path parameters. So with query parameters, you can use GET mapping and response body if you want to be able to just make the request like from the address bar and not actually do it through a form. And you can do that and actually return the page content using whatever value you have for that parameter, using that request param annotation for your parameter. And let's see, then you just have to restart with boot run to see it on the page as always. So let's say we wanted to add something. We could code another method here. And this one, I could say, I want get mapping and I want it to be for /artworks/add. And I'll do response body as before. And then say public string. And I'm going to say, ultimately, I'm going to change this name, but for now we could say, let's just call it add artwork. And then I'll change it in a bit. So, because we're gonna use a form ultimately, and so we're gonna change it to post mapping. But now for now, I can just do this request param and say, I want to enable this to receive a key value pair as a query parameter. And we're going to call that query parameter artwork. So the first thing I want to do is say, when we receive it, put it with, oh, and I forgot. Okay. We need another thing up here. We need a private static integer called next ID. Might be something you're familiar with. And since we already have 5 IDs, I'm going to say the next ID is 6 to start out. And then what we can do is when we receive a new one, we're going to say, okay, use the next ID for the next key, and then use artwork as the string for the next, the name of the art piece. We'll go ahead and add it to our hash map. And if we were working with a database, we'd have a different type of method here to say, hey, go put this in the database. But this is what we'll do for now. And then of course we have to take next ID and raise it, increment it by 1 for the next one. And then we can just return the content that we want. And I'm just going to copy this instead of typing it out. Something I should demonstrate for you guys real quick is, let's say I didn't have the rest of this on here. Oh gosh. When you're typing this HTML line after line after line like this to try to keep track of it, and notice it's not indented or anything, which is, it gets real obnoxious real fast. But if you have your cursor inside the quotes just at the end here and you hit the enter key, it automatically puts a plus sign and starts a new string for you on the next line. That's a very handy little thing. It'll make it go faster. And then I can do my closing HTML. And then, of course, I do need a semicolon to end that. But yeah, just a little trick for you. You can type out these lines by hitting enter from inside here, and I'll put the plus sign in place for you. But yeah, so we're gonna receive the artwork title, and then I'm gonna place it dynamically on the page so that unique piece of information gets added. And then I have links here to say either go back to the form to, oh, well, that's not going to work initially. This is what happens when I'm going to do a solution that ultimately ends up as being something different. Okay, let's just do for now, we'll say, view the updated list of artworks, and then we'll just leave it there. And we'll come back and we'll change it later when we make this post for a form. Okay, so if I do this and I restart my application, let's go back over here, and I'm going to say artworks and /add, and then put a question mark and say artwork equals, and I'm going to say water plus lilies. And it says you have successfully added water lilies to the collection. So it took that query parameter that I typed in and received it here, and set it into our hash map up here. And then I continued to use that as a local variable here to actually put it on the page as part of this content that I wanted to display after it was processed. And now I can view the updated list and look what we have. Water lilies is here because the first page is displaying exactly whatever's in that hash map, right? Mal, you have a question?
Yeah, you might be coming to this later, but I just wanted to check and see if you're going to live code an example using a select element. I was having some trouble with that in the exercise, kind of figuring out how to pass the selected option in as a parameter for language. So
this particular example, no. My solution for tonight's studio, yes, but I can talk about it in a bit when we talk about doing a text input. I'll talk about how you would do that for select. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And if I don't, remind me, because it's going to be after the break. Okay, so that's how we do a query parameter. What if we wanted to do a path parameter where we just have the slash, you know, and then some sort of dynamic piece of information? We can do that by just using get mapping again and response body, and then just use the path variable annotation instead of request param. And that means that Spring says, okay, if I receive that, I'm expecting it to actually be in the form of slash whatever that value is, and not question mark with a key value pair like a query param. So it'll handle it differently. And then you can still use it just like you did, you know, previously. So let's say we wanted to code this for the details on an artwork. I can do get mapping again. And this time I'm going to say I want this path to be details. Actually, no, artwork slash details slash, and then you use the curly braces to represent the path parameter, artwork ID, like this. And once you put it inside the curly braces, it basically says, okay, that's a placeholder for whatever that value is. And then it'll be able to receive it because of you using the path variable annotation in the parameters. So we'll say display artwork details, and I'll say path variable int artwork ID. Okay, so it knows to receive it as an integer and receive it with the name artwork ID so that we can then work with that. And then I'll return a little bit of content for the page, which I'll paste in for the sake of time. And I'm using it, right? I'm going to say, let's list the ID and then let's go to artworks and actually get the name of it and display that on the next line after name. So I'll restart the application. We'll come over here. And actually click on one of these. And it's not working. Okay. Let me go back to, let's just go actually go all the way back to here. Whoa, too many slashes. There we go. Go to the collection, go here. Yeah, it's not working. I did something wrong. Okay. Oh, artworks. I just have a typo, guys. This should say artworks. So getting the name of your path is important, as you can see. It has to be exact or it won't work. All right, so if I hit this again, oh, I have to restart it. Yeah. All part of the development process, guys. All right. Now, let's just go back to here. Still not working. Okay, so I have something else going on. What did I do?
Does it need the response body?
Yes, thank you. And the reason I forgot that is because, again, I told you that I was going to refactor the whole solution later, and it's going to, and it's not going to be there later because I'm going to put it at the class level instead of the method level. So yes, we just illustrated what happens if you don't put response body on, and this is how you're trying to send content. Excellent, good catch. All right, so I had two problems. All right, there we go. So now it says artwork. We have an ID. We have the name. If I change the parameter, I can even change it manually like this, and we see it catch up with the information. If I go back to the home page, and I really could just go to artworks and click on a different one from here, it'll go to it. And that's because I actually took the time to build in, you know, a link, an A tag that puts a link on each one of these names here that points to that ID number so that this would work when the time came. But it's something I actually ended up adding later. But yeah, but it works now that we have this. So yeah, so now we have, you know, multiple types of GET requests that can be handled for different routes, right? And you'll notice now that a bunch of them start with artworks, right? So at some point we're going to simplify that. Let's see. I want to finish this part. Yeah, I think I'm going to talk about that after we talk about forms, and then I'm going to show you just how to streamline it once we do that part. So does anybody have any more questions before we take a break? And then we'll come back and we'll do forms, and I'll show you how to do post mapping for a form request. No questions? Oh, Justin?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep,
Are we gonna learn how to do put
eventually.
eventually?
Hmm.
Okay, I was just curious because I know that as you stated earlier, the big four are get, post, put, and delete, but like put is basically post, it's just a little different. So I was just wondering when we would
Yep.
get to that.
We're gonna get to it more when we actually start working with databases to do and then we're gonna be using something called a CRUD repository that's gonna assist us with making those kinds of requests, but we'll get there.
Okay, thank you.
Zach?
So you said if you didn't have the append line, manually changing the link won't work, or what wouldn't work?
This just has to do with me using the Spring Builder, right? A string builder. And I added in a list item, and then I started adding, a link, and I'm just saying tack on to artwork/details and put the specific artwork ID so that it corresponds to this.
Okay, makes sense.
That's what I was doing. I did it ahead of time because I was just copying this over from my solution, but we weren't actually ready for it yet. So that's why I didn't click on any of those links until we actually had a handler that knew what to do with that path. Yeah.
Got
But
it,
that's
thank you.
how I formed it up, was to just keep, so remember that when you're working with String Builder, the append method is essentially concatenation.
Right.
It's just that they don't want you to use the plus sign, they want you to use append instead.
Yep, got it.
Yeah, IntelliJ gets really cranky about it. Okay, all right. Let's go ahead and take our 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and finish up by doing forms, and I'll show you how to streamline things into a second controller to simplify setting some of these paths and the annotations. All right, see you in a few. Okay, welcome back. I saw a question in the lecture questions channel about these double brackets here. So when you first initialize a empty hash map, you can finish it right there with a semicolon to just keep it empty. But if you want to put values in it immediately, you can do it like this with these double curly braces. And it allows you to put in lines of code. It basically gives it a little, like an anonymous function of sorts, where you can just, but you can call the put method directly that you normally would call on the, on the artworks object. And you just say, add all of these key value pairs, and you can just do it right there at the beginning. That's why I did it this way. It's a quick way to just kind of put together some sample data to be able to demonstrate what this is like if you had it coming out of a database eventually. And it gives us something we could add additional things to. As you saw, we added the water lilies with, an ID of 6. Okay, so that answers that question. So let's talk about form input. If you want to allow user input, you can have another route with its own controller method. And what we're going to do then is say that if we want to make it possible to do a post call, we'll just alter that other method that we had so that it's post instead of get. And then we can have them both work for the same route, add, but one will display the form initially as the get request, and the other one will post the result and display something different after the form has been submitted. But in the meantime, the request itself, when you send it from the form, is going to look a lot like this with a query parameter for that field. So let's see. Yeah, with the query parameter, question mark artwork equals water plus lilies. And you don't really see it because it happens so fast, but that's what it's doing. So we will actually be able to create the form this way, where we have a get mapping for that same path. And then, it doesn't have a parameter because we're just displaying the form in the first place. This is initially what they see when they go to this route. But you want to make sure the form has an action attribute and that you set it to the path where you want the user to be sent to when they hit the submit button. That's important. And then the input element is going to need to have a name, and that name has to correspond with whatever the query param is going to be in the other method where you're receiving the query parameter. So this, to answer the earlier question about how you do this with select, remember that select tags are meant to contain a bunch of options, right? And all of the options have different values that represent all the different things in the dropdown, but the select tag is where you put the name attribute. And that way, no matter what the value is that's selected by the user, it has a name attached to the select tag, and that's what corresponds to the query parameter, much like you would just do this for a regular input. So when you do Studio tonight, that's how you're going to do it. You just have names on your text input and on your 3 selects. All right. So the other thing we're going to need to do is to transform our other one previously that handles the query parameter to be a post so that we can use that same route if we want to. And form uses the get method by default. If you leave it off and you don't have a method attribute, it's going to use get. So we have to explicitly add method equals post to that form tag to make that happen. And then we can use post mapping instead of get mapping to handle those query parameters. And then we can get away with having the exact same route /add. Okay, so let's come over to the code here, and I'm going to close this so we have more space here to see what we're doing. So right now, we have a get mapping here for /artwork/add. But we don't actually want this to be what's displayed on the page initially. We want a form instead. So we're going to add a second one here. And I'm not gonna spin up this project until we've done all this refactoring. So it's going to be the exact same path, artworks/add. We'll do response body, and then public string and we'll say, display, add artwork form. And then we can just return, the content of what we want the form to be. For the sake of time, because I'm not sure where we're going to land, how close we'll get to the end of the hour, I'm just going to paste it in again, but I'll talk about it. So I've got a form in a form tag. I've added an action attribute, and I've said I want this to be sent to artworks add, which is what we're going to turn this into. But the method needs to be post. So this is where we need to change this one to be from get to post mapping. And now we actually have something that can handle this request when it's sent from the form. And I have a button here that's of type submit, and whenever that's clicked on, this action automatically gets used. That's what the browser's, built to do. It'll just automatically use that and say, okay, here's where I'm going to send it to, but I'm sending to it post. And so it's going to, when it comes back to the application and it's set to post, even though we have two different methods here that are for the same route, Spring knows which one to use because this one is get and this one is post. And it's going to use this one instead and display this information, and it'll allow us to accept that query parameter. So here's the other important piece of this. Notice that the input here, I've got the text input for the name, has the name of artwork, just like you're going to do for your selects as well. It has to correspond to this name exactly for the query parameter in order for it to work. If you have the name of the input in the form set to that and you use it here for the query parameter as your local variable, the data will come through properly. Otherwise, it won't if they don't match. So just be careful about that, that those names are the same. Okay, so now we have a form that will be displayed when we go to render this route. And we have something different that will be displayed when we go to submit the form with a post method instead. So let's restart the application and go see how this works. And this is where I actually need to add in, I actually should have waited, hold on. Nope, I have it here. Okay, so yeah, I have this this link here. I think it was somewhere else where I took it out, wasn't it? Here we go. I'm going to replace one line of this one. Yeah, now that we have the form set up, I'm going to replace this line here so that we could actually send them back to add another artwork if we want to. Let me restart that one more time. And then I'm going to take it all the way back to the beginning. And we'll follow our links. So we're at localhost 8080. We go here and we end up at /artworks. It displays the list of artworks and says, click here to add another artwork. So I click on that and it takes me now to my form because that is what we have set for the get mapping for /artwork/add. That's exactly where we are. So I go in here and I say, okay, I would like to add water lilies. And I hit submit. And it stays at artworks/add, but because that was a post method, it used this one instead. And now I'm seeing this content on the page. Artwork added. You have successfully added water lilies to the collection. And now I have two choices. I can add another artwork or I can view the updated list. And so I can go to two different places on my site. This will take me back to the list, or this will take me to the form. This is a great way to be able to kind of, set things where you can move around back and forth and reference, different routes and make, and you have distinct methods, Java methods here, these handlers that are handling different types of HTTP methods, get and post, for different routes. And depending on what your combination of these is and how you refer to them, for example, making sure that you're saying that the form is supposed to go to this specific route with this specific method, then Spring knows what to do and which one of these to run when the request comes through. Devin?
Do the get mapping and post mapping need to be one on top of the other, or it just doesn't matter? The IntelliJ just knows.
You can do that under certain circumstances if you don't need to display. Well, you could do it depending on how you want to display things. The reason I did it this way is because I wanted to have a very different, very different content on the page. And I just wanted to keep them separate. There's an example in your course book about how to do it where you use both methods in a single handler, and you use request mapping instead of get mapping and post mapping, and just enable it to use both. I think Chris Bay covers that in one of those videos. Yeah. Okay, so that's how we handle forms. Jesse, you have a quick question? Jesse?
Sorry, I thought I was unmuted. So since get and post are essentially the same thing, but post is more secure by not having the information in the URL, can you have multiple posts but have them go to different locations the way you had them separated between the get and the post?
Yes, you just have to make sure that the form knows which one to use.
Okay.
Yeah, by the time we get done with this application, we're going to have several forms that all have, several different handlers to do different things to different pages. And yeah, mostly you just have to make sure that when the browser uses this upon submission, that your Java application has a way to handle it one way or another. And in this case, I have a separate, method that's specifically for post mapping. Yeah. Okay, so now that we've done this and we have everything all in one controller, let's look and see what it would look like to actually streamline things, because you can take things that have a related path, a related route, and separate them out into another controller. And that way, because you can imagine if this website got really big with tons of different sections, this file could get really, really big. So here's how you do that. You want to use request mapping at the class level up here to set the root path for that file. And then you want to use response body at that level if you can, because every single one of your methods is not returning a template and is returning just, text. And then we can take it off of all the individual methods. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. To do that, we're going to do that with artworks here and actually create an artwork controller. And then that simplifies your annotations quite a bit. And then the last thing you want to do is to change the way that your routes are done on the method level, because relative to the one that's at the class level, you no longer need to specify that part anymore. So I'm going to show you how to, make that adjustment. So here's what we're going to do. Yeah, that's what that says. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to come over here. I'm going to go to the controllers package on the left here and say new Java class, and I'm going to create an artwork controller. And I'll put the controller annotation on it. But in addition to that, I'm going to do request mapping and say I want everything in this controller to automatically have this route as its base. Not just the original slash that was for the root that we have in gallery controller. And then I also know right now I don't have any templates. So let's just go ahead and put response body at the class level, and then I won't need to have it on all of my methods here. So now we just need to grab all of these methods and move them over. Everything except for our initial rendering the home page. So I'm going to grab these. I'm also going to need to move my data, so we'll do that in a second too. Let me grab that. All right. So the gallery controller does the gallery homepage now, and that's it. But if we come in here and have all of these, we can remove the unneeded import statements and kind of clean that up. And then that's all there is to that. So now we have this set as the base. So two things. Let's do this one first. We can take response body off of all of the individual methods because we're handling it at the class level. And we keep all of the specific get and post mapping here, but we need to amend these references to the route because we already have /artworks up here. So for this one, I'm literally just going to have an empty string. This one, I'm going to take /artworks out and just have /add. I'll do the same thing here for the post handler. And then for this one, I'll just take the /artworks out and start with /details /artwork ID. So that's the main thing to remember. I remember this being a little confusing for me when I was a student. If you decide to have a separate controller, you just set what you want that to be at the top and then just don't repeat it here because everything is going to be relative to this now. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions about what I just did? Notice that when I have things like links, I keep it this way. And the reason for that is because the browser is concerned with everything relative to the root. So I'm keeping /artworks in here for like my anchor links and stuff because that's the browser needs that. But Spring does not need that here is if you set this up here. So it has to do with the way that your file is set up, not to do with the links within the HTML. So let's rerun this and confirm that it's all still working the way that we expect it to. I'm going to take it all the way back to the root. Okay. So we can click on this. We get our list at /artworks. If I go here, I get the form. I can add water lilies. And I get this. I can view the updated list. I can go to a details page. Everything's working exactly the way it should because when I refactored, I made sure to adjust for the fact that I set everything to be relative to /artworks from the top. Okay, any last questions about what we've done today? Yumi?
I think I might have misunderstood something about what the get mapping does. I thought the difference with post was that get stores information in the URL, but then when you're using the get mapping, I didn't see anything changing in the URL. So what makes that a get?
Get mapping has to do with it has more to do with the HTTP methods. So get is a method where the browser is reaching out and saying to the back end, give me some information. I'm just requesting some information. Can you send it to me? And so in this case, I'm using get pretty consistently every time I want to render or display a page and just say, hey, can you just give me back what I need to put on the page? I'm using post because post is about sending information and receiving something back. So I'm sending the query parameter so that something can be done with it, but then I'm also receiving back the next content that needs to be displayed for that route. So I'm handling both ways, send and receive. And then for something like this, again, you're just requesting information, but you're passing along a specific piece of criteria to say, I'm making a request to you, and this is the information you need to base it on. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, because post has to do with sending new information that needs to be stored somewhere on the back end. Usually. All right, Devin?
Yes, sorry if you already answered this. I had to step away at the beginning of the class. The controllers has a different icon from the org, so it's not a package. What exactly is that? Did I miss that at the beginning? Yeah, in the tree, the controllers.
It's just sometimes you'll find that certain packages will have special icons depending on what icon theme you're using. I have a specific icon theme installed. But sometimes it'll do that when it recognizes it as something special to the structure of the project. Just like up here, the Java one has a different icon. That's all that is. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
because a Spring project, it's going to immediately recognize that that controllers is a very specific name because it knows to look there for your controllers. So it matters. Like if I was to call it something different, it's not going to look like that anymore.
Cool. So
Yeah.
it would make sense to like have the main app be one package, the controllers be a different package, and like even the templates to be a different package? Or
Yeah,
am I
the templates are
overthinking that?
actually going to be down here in resources. There's a folder for that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
When we get into Time Leaf in a couple of classes, this is where we'll be putting our templates.
Perfect.
Yep, because that's exactly where Spring is going to look for them. All right, any last questions? Okay. So coming down the bike, we're going to switch gears from Spring for just one class. And we're going to talk about exceptions and tools in IntelliJ. That's the pre-work is chapters 11 and 12 for that. Then you'll have your catch-up class next Thursday, and then the following Monday will be when we get into Time Leaf, so we'll come back to the Spring project. And that's when you'll learn how to do these Time Leaf special syntax with HTML templates. And you also have graded assignment 2 due that day. The class after that is we're gonna get into models and model binding. So we did the C part of MVC tonight. On the 2nd, we'll do the V part, the view. And then on Thursday the 5th, we will do the M part, models. And then you'll see how it all comes together. Okay, so for studio tonight, you are going to go to chapter 10 and do the studio called Skills Tracker. You're going to use Spring Initializer, just like this, to create a new project. So this does not go in an existing repo. You want a new one. And you want to code a controller called Skills Controller to handle your routing at localhost 8080. You're going to have 3 different methods, 3 different handlers. And the second one will be about your form, where you're going to actually update. So the third one will allow you to post to that same route with the information coming from the form. And then there's a couple of small bonus missions that don't take long at all. I have this video up already. It'll go live at 8:30, and you guys will be able to check out that studio review later. So have fun with that, and I will see you guys on Monday.